gangsters! Let's return once again to the magical world of Hofner's top-of-the-line electric from the late 1960s, the 7400. You'll recall from last week that I couldn't get the darn thing's neck off because of a screw that had no business doing what it was doing. Let's see what happens now, shall we?
Let's become tool and die makers. Actually, I had a friend who was a tool and die maker. He now runs a hotel in the Rocky Mountains of British Columbia. But we have here a piece of stainless steel tubing. It's rather thick-walled. It's about 1 millimeter thick. And I think it will make a decent coring device. So I have to cut saw teeth into the end. Oh yeah, this thing is good and hard.
And yes, I know they do make a tool like this, but it's only about 2 inches long, and I need something substantially longer, because I'm not dealing with a 2-inch screw. Following the Spice Girls directive, I decided to be a little bit wiser, baby, and use my Dremel cutoff wheel, which even still took quite a long time.
Darken the area where I'll be cutting the teeth, so I can see what I'm doing. I have to lay out for the number of teeth I want. I think I'm going to go with 8. Idea being that more teeth would be better, as this is essentially going to be a scraping operation through end grain, and sort of share the load amongst all of the teeth rather than having like 4 or something. 12 might be better, but that's a lot of filing. And do the top as well here.
Marking, marking, marking. I started the teeth with a Dremel grinder, then got in there with a file and shaped them. This took some doing. It is tough stuff. Eventually, though, I came up with something I thought might work. During my efforts to drill through the screw head, the front of the hole became wallowed out and no longer cylindrical. It's really quite messy. So I actually cast a support around the shaft of the tool with epoxy putty to make sure I stayed on course. Gave me a guide.
Keep this as cool as possible and as free of debris.
This continued for several minutes. I would let it cool down, check my progress. It required some effort to push the drill forward, but on the whole it wasn't too arduous. Eventually I made my way through the entire block, and you can see the tip of the screw right at the end there. It's very satisfying.
Put a dowel in the hole through the heel section here, just to firm things up. It's just temporary. While I heat the area. But first I have to kind of try and remove some of this filler material. I said lacquer stick last time. I'm not sure if that's what it is. It could be glue. It's got an interesting texture. But it would definitely slow things down. The issue, as I've mentioned before, in this kind of joint is you have 3 large surfaces that have all been, or perhaps even 4, depending on how much glue was put on the front side of the tenon on the neck here of the heel. That's so much surface area that all of that glue tends to hold everything together. Even when it's hot, it's still sticky enough that it can be hard to push around. So I have to excavate as much as I can. I almost want to saw through it. That might be easier. At least to get a line started.
There's also some glue or filler right in the corner between the heel and the sides. Now this is a joint that goes directly in. I have to get that out, otherwise I'll never have a chance. I'll heat up the 15th fret, and out it comes. There sure is a lot of playware. I don't know if that's strumware or grooves from someone doing some odd solos. I'll drill some thin holes for the heat probes. In this case, because I'm not working with a dovetail, this is a full width tenon. I'm going to keep these as close to the edge of the board as I can without getting afraid for the binding, the celluloid. So the heat will be closest to that glue line. These probes are foam cutters from our friends at hotwirefoamfactory.com in California. I like them better than some of the import ones you can buy on Amazon because they don't seem to run as hot, and they're also thinner, so you can get away with a smaller diameter hole, and they seem to be lasting a good long time. Whatever's adhering the extension is very tough stuff. After about 10 minutes of heat, I can start wiggling, being careful because all of this is connected to both the sides and that binding. And I really don't want to break anything, so this took several attempts. I'd heat it up, wiggle a bit, eventually let it cool down, and then heat it up again. So this was more difficult than it had any right to be. Something was weird. I couldn't push the neck up. It would only come out, which is kind of hair-raising because you got to rock it to do that, and you don't want to rock it too hard, despite Dee Snider's admonitions, for fear of breaking or damaging the back, which comes over the heel, or perhaps snapping that irreplaceable pearl binding. Moving these things takes some muscle, but you got to be judicious. More heat, more wiggles. I put the blade of my palette knife in there to act as kind of a bearing surface because it felt like it really wanted to, tear that chunk away, and this seemed to prevent it. And come on. Yay! Hooray! Wow. It feels and smells to me like there's at least 2 different kinds of glue in here. Okay, this glue under the extension is fun to play with, but I think it's a modified hide glue with something like urea added to it to make it more thick and floppy. It does not behave like any other glue. After you've escaped from Stalag Luft and you're on the run in disguise, you make sure you draw your ones like this, or they'll catch you, Yankee Doodle. So much glue. It's a veritable lake. And it was hiding this. That is a headless screw driven right through the binding and into the neck block to lock the heel in place. Yeah. I mean, it did keep the neck from falling off. But I don't know. Really? There's no way this thing's coming out without the binding crumbling, so I'm going to hit it with the saw. Before I get into the actual setting of the neck, I want to have a quick look at the bridge here, which I'm assuming is not original. It looks a little more Gibson-y. And its relationship with the pickups, because this could really affect the setup here. Running a straight edge off of the neck pickup, I can see there's probably more clearance than we want above the bridge pickup, and this is bottomed out again. So we're hoping to have a few threads worth of clearance there for future adjustment, something like that. I'm just wondering whether I should take a little bit more material off this bridge base. This is a rather thin base to begin with. I don't have a whole lot of material to work with there. Maybe we just leave it, and if needs be, in future, you can always make a pickup riser if that's of serious concern. I would like to stick this in place with some double-sided tape here, just to give me a height to work to. And I'm going to lower these all the way down to the base again. That'll give me basically the lowest possible setup height for the clearance of this pickup. In practice, if I have the line of the frets come to the top of the saddles here, that means there's going to be about an 1/8 of an inch gap. Something like that, which is kind of normal.
Okay, I continue to mull it over. I had to go and look online. I checked out every single photographic example of this guitar I could find. And no two of them had the same bridge. They're all different. I saw a number of ABR style bridges like this. I saw some Gretsch. I saw some of the older Hofners with the fret wire saddles on them. I saw varying heights. I saw things I'd never seen before. But it seems that whatever was on here wasn't great because every single person who owned one of these things changed it. I think this is a good choice. I like the bridge. My one reservation is that these saddles are slotted in such a way that we're just barely going to touch the outside edges of these little staple pole pieces here. And, you know, I suppose at some point another bridge could be obtained without slots. And it could be more judiciously slotted for this string spacing these pickups were designed for. However, you know, I think we're going to go with it. This seems like the thing to do. Just holding the parts in position to make this kind of judgment is really difficult because, well, I got 3 axes of play now. This isn't a dovetail. It doesn't self-lock, so this could basically end up anywhere. Right? It's just, you know, it's got to come back a bit because I'm below the height of the saddles. You know, that's exactly what I want there. How do I attain that in this weird system where I've got basically a straight square mortise and what's almost a square tenon? I have to cut an angle on this face, but ascertaining what that's going to be is difficult, and actually having these parts made up. We're going to end up with a screw in here again. Hopefully we'll do that a little more elegantly than previous, but there's got to be some kind of clamping situation in the guitar after we've glued it together, because I don't like this. Like, the end of this tenon here is not perpendicular to the center line of the neck. I think I'm going to start by furring out the sides of the tenon just a little bit. I'm going to have wood-to-wood contact this time. I think these are put together with faith in the glue and a lot of glue. You know, the old glue has a sort of formaldehyde-like smell, which suggests to me it's like a urea resorcinol kind of situation. They're using that as an extender for hide glue. Gives it a longer working time. Unfortunately, robs it a lot of the properties that we actually enjoy when it comes to hide glue. I glued on a couple of pieces of maple veneer to give me something to work with. Here's something a little different. It's not something we've covered before. This is an electric upright bass. It's quite an instrument. This is an Eminence upright. This was the initial brainchild of a luthier called Scott Zumberg, who built the first prototype in 1990. Scott unfortunately passed away soon after, and another luthier, Gary Edwards, got permission from Zumberg's estate to keep working on the idea. By the late 90s, they were in production, garnering a lot of positive attention because, as you might suspect, being an upright bassist comes along with a certain number of headaches if you gig and travel. The thing is, the sound and feel of these are quite well regarded by the upright bass community because they come very close to replicating the sonic experience of a full-sized double bass. Because yes, this is effectively the same as playing a concert-sized full-scale bass. I think the standard is around 41 inches if memory serves. For the scale length. I'll look it up. Anyway, these things were quite popular for about 20 years, and then supply chain issues during the worldwide contagion really put a damper on production, as these are made by one of the top-end violin family producers in China. They haven't been available this decade, basically. The rights to make them were purchased by Gallagher Music in New Jersey, which is a bass-oriented retailer, and that kind of makes sense. But they haven't been able to get production sorted out either. And just looking at their site the other day, they have a little post about the effects tariffs are going to have on their small business and musical instruments prices and stuff in general. I won't get into the full thing, but the industry is about to get hit hard enough that it's likely going to change forever in ways a lot of people are going to be sad about. This particular example is owned and operated by a local musician who plays it and enjoys it. And unfortunately, she's been told by several different shops that it's unfixable. Now, I don't know how deeply they've gone into it, and what's happening. Maybe they just didn't want to take on the job. I don't know. The thing is, this has a removable neck, which is a great boon to the musician who travels. The case lets you carry it fully assembled like this, but it's nice to know that you could make it shorter if need be. On examination, and I'm sorry, like, you realize my shop is not set up to film something of this scale. It's going to be tough, but I'll do my best. It's practically unplayable. In guitar terms, it would be like having an acoustic guitar with an action around ½ an inch off the fretboard. And this is not far off from that. Neck reset time, in other words. The fact that the neck is removable, I haven't tried that yet, suggests that this is not unfixable. My brain's already running in ways of how it would work, but there doesn't seem to be any gross distortion of the body. There is, however, a serious issue with the fretboard, and that it's delaminating from the neck proper. So we definitely have to fix that, and hopefully by doing that we're going to take care of another issue. There's also a bit too much scoop, which is what the violin folks call it, akin to neck relief in guitar terminology, where there's a bit of a curve to the fingerboard that mimics the sort of oblong shape of a string in motion. But really, I mean, playing this thing, pushing the strings down to the board takes such an effort that they're hopelessly out of tune by the time you reach it, It's hard to describe how bad this action is. Start by detuning the strings and seeing if the neck comes back to something like straight. Not quite, but it's better. We'll see if maybe we can clamp that with something. Let's see if I can clean out some of the glue. I don't really want to pull the entire fretboard off this thing if I don't have to. I've been thinking about ways to clamp this. I really want something solid and straight and pretty rigid. And yet it's got to be quick because I'm using hot hide glue, which is, I'd like to think that's what this was put together with. And in the future, if it finds its way into the hands of a true violin repair person, they'll feel at home and they won't judge me. So this is my neck heater, usually used on guitars, of course. It's a thick-walled aluminum rectangle. It has an integral clamp I built that sort of keeps it centered, and it's pretty quick to screw into place. I've also got a cork-padded block with a hollow on it that I can throw another clamp or two on as well. I've been debating on whether I should actually heat this thing up. I'm not sure it's necessary, but it might be nice. This is fairly cool material, and I want to make sure I get things clamped together before it starts to gel. So I think I'll turn this thing on for a while and warm it up. I'll also heat up a fresh batch of hide glue to about 150 degrees Fahrenheit. I'll squirt some glue in with a syringe. Yes, the shop is an absolute nightmare in the background these days. I crop out the sadness. I'll work it through with a palette knife, which has been heated, and get it all clamped up in less than a minute. So with the fingerboard and the neck back into alignment, just checking out the scoop here, it seems much reduced and more normal looking. I checked out Henry Strobel's Useful Measurements for Violin Makers, which is one of my go-to resources for these things when I'm dabbling in the arcane arts of violinery. And generally he says that people like, well, the measurement is usually around the same diameter as the string. So on a full-size bass, it'll be somewhere around 100 thousandths down to maybe 60 thousandths at about the halfway point of the string length. I'm going to string it up and see what it looks like under tension. I'm just getting rid of some of the accumulated grunge with some 1200 grit sandpaper here. And I'm noticing a little hairline crack that runs up from the end of the board here, which, like all little hairline cracks, we don't want to leave alone for too long. This instrument was built in 2010, so 15 years ago now.
This is some ebony dust.
Using some thin cyanoacrylate. We'll let that wick in. And I'm going to hit it with some 400 grit sandpaper. This will mix the glue with some dust I've already applied to the surface and other dust which will come up from the sanding.
You could use a second application.
Switch to 600. These grits are so fine that they're not really going to affect the straightness of the board to any degree. This is just a light surfacing. With string tension on, the scoop is still way too much. I'm going to have to reshape the fretboard. At the nut end, yeah. Especially that D string there, it's way high. So I'm going to have to take some off on the nut end, which will coincidentally tip the angle of the strings upwards relative to the bridge, meaning we'll have a little bit more adjustment. And there's still plenty of thickness for the
Fingerboard.
to allow me to do that. Not what I wanted, but it is what it is. I've popped the nut off. I'm just going to scribe the arc of the end of the fingerboard. This is going to be hard for me to do while holding the camera. I'm sorry.
Here's a shot that went awry. I'll be removing about 2.5 millimeters in thickness from the very end of this board.
I've marked the harmonic midpoint of the scale length, the octave here, and also the fifth. So most of the material I'll be taking away is coming down off this end of the board. As I mentioned, that's going to effectively kick the angle of the strings upwards, effectively lowering the action while at the same time reducing the amount of scoop. This is my 5 1/4 junior jack plane with a little bit of wax on the sole, set for a very fine cut, and it's very sharp. So it's just going to start removing things at the very end of the board, as it's registering off the scoop that's there. I want to keep the lines sort of parallel with the angle of the fingerboard.
In line with the strings, basically.
The surface I'm planing is pretty plain to see. The trick is, of course, to maintain the radius that was on there previously.
I'll use a cabinet scraper to blend the curve. And then sand it till it gleams.
Having reduced the thickness of the fretboard, the string height at the nut now is much too high.
I'll deepen the slots until they're about 16 thousandths over the surface of the fingerboard. That's maybe 0.4 millimeters. It's a very small space.
To allow the base to collapse, there is a tightly machined dovetail joint that's attached to the heel. And on the back of the instrument, there's a knob which is attached to a screw. Looking at the end of the heel here and its pocket in the body, there's approximately a 1 millimeter gap between the base of the heel and the back there. If I wanted to lower the action, I suppose I could make a spacer that would go in there. Pull this bolt out and see how long it is. Plenty of room there. Now this is a really tight fit. It might take some doing to move the neck in the pocket. It probably hasn't been moved for a very long time. Unfortunately, these parts have become welded together. They're really, really stuck to the point where, even taps from a hammer aren't going to move them. So I'm just going to let it be what it is. Okay, with all of that, measuring at the end of the fingerboard here, we're looking at a jazzy 6mm, which an orchestral player who does strong bowing might consider too low, but the average pizzicato player is going to think real nice. Now we're still bottomed out on the bridge adjusters here, but it seems like the setup is pretty optimal. No real need to change this. I could, I think, finagle a bit more height out of the neck by making a shim or something, but why mess with it if it's playing the way you want it to play? We can save that for some other time if it's necessary.
The fitting process for the neck continues. I'll sand down the patches I put on either side. I'm using some carbon paper to show off where the tight spots are. You can see I'm binding up here at the top edge. I'll scrape that down and try it again. So this is to get the neck fitting in the pocket side to side. I also have to establish the pitch of the neck so that it aligns with the bridge. I also have to concern myself with the alignment for the string spacing to make sure that the neck isn't canted relative to the center line. And the more I'm looking at this bridge, the more I'm disliking it. I think it really would do well with a fresh ABR unslotted so that I could get the string spacing somewhere close to where it should be. And in the third dimension, I want to establish the angle between the base of the mortise, or the surface of the back, and the front surface of the neck block, because those aren't a right angle, and I have to transfer this over to the front face of the heel because I want them to really lock together. If there's a big gap in there, you're kind of relying on glue to fill it, and when it comes time to actually glue it up, sometimes it'll shift, to the point where it's an unreliable joint, and then you take the clamps off and find out that the angle's wrong. So these have to mate well. This is not the brightest way to build an electric guitar. Even measuring and marking this is difficult because the heel cap is in the way. I'm going to have to do a lot of test fitting and sneak up on it, which means that this guitar is not going to get done in this video. I know there's some of you who absolutely can't stand that, but you know what? It's a serial adventure. Eventually it'll get done. But them's the breaks sometimes.